Okay, so we've got quite the collection here today.
Yeah, it looks like a really fascinating set of conversations to dive into.
Yeah, you guys sent us a bunch of YouTube conversations, and I think it's really interesting that they are on YouTube and not sort of professionally produced, podcast type interviews.
Right. Yeah, that's kind of a raw, unfiltered look into how people who are really in the trenches of AI product management are thinking about this space.
Yeah, exactly. And we've got Marilee Nika, who is I believe she's at Meta now. She's been at Google.
Yeah, she's got a pretty impressive background.
And then we've got Don R., who has worked at a ton of places like Meta, Google, Uber, and even NASA.
Wow, what a range.
And then Geeky Baller, who's sort of this YouTube personality who focuses on, careers in tech and that sort of thing.
Yeah, he's got a good following and seems to have a really good grasp of the AI PM landscape.
So we're going to dive into the world of AI product management. And really our mission here is to, cut through all the hype and try to give you, the learner, the essential knowledge you need to understand, what it really means to be an AI PM, how it's different from traditional PM, and how you can start to navigate this space.
I think it's a crucial area to explore right now because, as you mentioned, AI, it's not some distant future. It's really becoming integrated into the products we use every day.
Yeah, exactly.
And these conversations give us a really valuable glimpse into how the people who are actually shaping this evolution are thinking about it.
Absolutely. So let's start with Marilee Nika.
Yeah.
One of the things that really stood out to me right away was her strong warning against what she calls the shiny object trap. This idea that we shouldn't be just doing AI for the sake of doing AI.
Right. And I think that's such a foundational point for the learner.
Yeah.
Technology, no matter how advanced it is, should always serve a clear purpose. Marilee really highlights that you need to identify a real problem, a real pain point for users first, before you even consider an AI solution.
Yeah.
It's about finding the right problem for AI to solve. So for you, the learner, it's not just don't do AI for AI's sake. It's more about asking yourself, what specific user need or pain point can AI uniquely address or solve better than existing methods?
Exactly. And then on the flip side, she also made this prediction that eventually AI is going to be integrated into absolutely everything.
Yeah, that's pretty bold.
It's not going to be a separate category for very long.
It suggests that AI is not going to remain this niche area, but it's going to become a foundational layer across all sorts of products and services, much like the internet has. It's going to be everywhere.
Yeah, and it kind of leads into her next point about, what's being overhyped and what's not getting enough attention.
Right.
She thinks that the fears around AI taking jobs specifically, she mentioned writers being worried about tools like 2BP are a little bit overblown, but she thinks that the broader applications of AI, like she even mentioned some things from a research article about light detection technology.
Right.
Those are being kind of underestimated right now.
It is fascinating how, our anxieties tend to focus on these very specific areas like creative professions, when in reality, there are much more widespread and potentially transformative applications of AI in areas like, security, environmental monitoring, or even, basic infrastructure that often go unnoticed.
Yeah.
And, the fear of job displacement is understandable, but I think it's also important to recognize the potential for AI to amplify human capabilities and open up entirely new possibilities.
Yeah, absolutely. And then she went on to share some really practical ways that she uses ChatGPT in her own workflow.
Oh, that's always interesting to hear how people are actually using these tools.
Yeah, she mentioned using it for refining mission statements, making them clearer and more impactful for a broader audience.
That's clever. Crafting a really good mission statement is tough. It's got to be concise, inspiring, and resonate with everyone from, new team members to external partners. And using an LLM to get that broader clarity is pretty smart.
Yeah, and then I thought her example of using it for user segmentation was really interesting.
Oh, yeah. How does she describe that?
So she was working on this fitness band that didn't have a screen.
Okay.
And she prompted ChatGPT to, come up with potential user segments for a fitness band without a screen.
Interesting.
And it gave her back all these segments and their motivations that her team hadn't even thought of.
Wow, that's a great example of how AI can help us break free from our, existing ways of thinking and offer fresh perspectives.
Yeah.
And by generating, this wider range of potential users and their needs, it can really fuel innovation.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder how often our own biases might be limiting us, when we think about who our users are and what they want.
Absolutely. She also mentioned using it for enhancing existing ideas.
Oh, so taking something that's already there and kind of pushing it further.
Yeah, and all of this leads to her belief that ultimately every product manager is going to become an AI product manager.
Well, it's a pretty bold statement.
Yeah.
But her reasoning there is actually quite logical. It's based on the increasing demand for personalization in almost every
Like
product.
Netflix recommendations.
Exactly. And the ongoing push for automation across industries.
Right.
And if these trends continue, having at least a basic understanding of how AI can contribute to those is going to become indispensable for any product manager.
Yeah, and she argues that this shift is going to require a much closer partnership between PMs and research scientists
Right.
to actually build these, intelligent models.
So essentially, bridging the gap between the world of research and the world of product development.
Yeah, exactly. And she acknowledges that this can bring challenges because research is inherently uncertain.
Yeah. There's no guarantee of a specific outcome.
Right, and product teams and research teams often work in very different ways.
Right. They have different timelines, different priorities.
Yeah.
So being able to bridge that gap and manage those expectations is going to be a crucial skill for AI PMs in the future.
Yeah, I think, for those PMs out there who are listening to all of this and feeling a little bit overwhelmed,
Right. It can be a lot to take in.
Marilee actually had some really reassuring advice.
Oh, good.
She stressed that, you don't actually have to know how to code to start working with AI.
That's a relief.
Yeah, and she suggests just looking at the data that your products are already generating and thinking about, what are some potential smarter features that you could build?
Interesting. So focusing on those opportunities to leverage data.
Yeah, things like improved security,
Right.
better personalization, fraud detection, even ethical considerations in things like healthcare applications.
Right. Thinking about how AI could address those specific needs.
And she even suggested, hiring data science interns as a way to start building that expertise.
That's a smart move. You can bring in some AI expertise without making a huge initial investment, and you can explore potential applications in a very focused way.
Yeah, and she gave a really clear definition of what she sees as the core role of an AI PM.
Oh, what was that?
They help their team solve the right problem.
Right. So not just jumping on the AI bandwagon.
Exactly. It's about focusing on the user needs and the pain points that AI is uniquely positioned to address.
And that really goes back to your point about the shiny object trap.
Yeah.
The core focus should always be on solving a real user problem, and AI should be seen as a powerful tool to do that, not the objective in and of itself.
Exactly. And she also gave some good indicators of when AI might not be the right solution.
Oh, that's helpful to know as well.
Yeah, she really advised against using AI for MVPs.
Minimum viable products.
Yeah.
So that initial version of a product that you put out there to test the market.
Right. And she suggested instead to just fake it with prototypes.
All right, just to get that initial feedback and see if there's even interest before you invest in building out a complex AI solution.
Yeah, exactly. AM should really come into play when you already have existing product data or data that's closely related to what you're trying to do.
That makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
MVPs are all about validating those core value propositions, quickly and efficiently.
Yeah.
And investing in complex AI models before you've even confirmed the fundamental user need can be a huge waste of resources.
Absolutely. And then she talked about data requirements, and she acknowledged that, the amount of data you need varies a lot depending on the complexity of the task.
Right.
So she used the example of, teaching a model to distinguish between a cat and a dog
Okay.
versus something much more complex like natural language processing.
NLP,
Yeah.
which for those of you listening, the learner NLP or natural language processing is all about teaching computers to understand and process human language, which is incredibly complex.
Yeah, exactly. And she pointed out how this data dependency is a real challenge for startups.
Right, because they often don't have access to those large data sets that are needed for, training more sophisticated models.
Yeah. And then when it comes to the decision of building versus buying AI models,
That's the big one.
she suggested that, large companies that have unique data and a need for differentiation, they should consider building their own proprietary models.
Right. If you have a real competitive advantage in terms of the data you have access to, it might make sense to build your own.
But she emphasized the role of the PM in deciding when the quality of an off-the-shelf model is good enough to actually launch.
That's a really pragmatic approach.
Sure.
Building and maintaining custom AI models can be extremely expensive.
Oh, yeah.
And for a lot of applications, using an existing well-established model might be a faster and more cost-effective way to get to market.
Right.
It's about carefully weighing the trade-offs between control customization and speed.
And to kind of make these concepts of models and training a little bit more understandable, she used a great analogy.
Oh, I love a good analogy.
She talked about teaching a child about animals.
Okay.
So the model is like the child's brain.
Okay.
It takes in information and gives you a probability based on what it's learned.
Right. So it sees a picture and says, I think that's a cat.
Exactly. And then
Right.
training is like showing the child thousands of pictures of cats and dogs.
So the model can learn to distinguish between the two based on the patterns it observes.
Right. And the output of this training isn't always another model.
Right. It depends on the task.
Yeah, it could be something like a transcription in the case of speech recognition.
Right. So converting audio into text.
Exactly. And speaking of, really cool real-world applications, she highlighted the translating glasses that the Google AR VR team is working on.
Oh, yeah. I saw something about those.
It's a great example of AI being used to break down communication barriers.
Yeah. Having real-time translation built into a wearable device could have a huge impact on communication and accessibility.
Ah.
Imagine being able to travel to any country and have a conversation with anyone, regardless of language.
Sure.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And then, of course, the question of AI replacing PMs came up.
That's the big fear, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Marilee was very clear she doesn't see that happening.
Yeah.
Instead, she thinks AI is going to free up PMs to do more strategic work.
So automating some of those more mundane tasks.
Yeah, like writing PRDs, product requirement documents.
Right.
But to prepare for this future, she encourages PMs to actually learn to code.
Oh, interesting.
Not necessarily to become engineers,
Right.
but just to understand the fundamentals and be more confident in using AI tools.
I think that makes a lot of sense.
Mm.
Even a basic understanding of coding can really help PMs communicate better with their technical teams.
Yeah, and she even recommended some resources like Coursera's Introduction to AI by Stanford and some coding boot camps like Career Foundry and Coding Dojo.
Yeah, those are all great places to start.
Yeah, and for those who are early in their careers and want to become strong AI PMs, she mentioned her Maven course that she teaches and also some offline options. And she really emphasized the importance of understanding the differences between general product development and AI product development.
Right. It's a different beast.
Yeah, and she also encourages people to talk to AI researchers, shadow them, learn about their work.
Yeah, immersing yourself in the world of AI, even without a deep technical background, is really valuable
Yeah,
because it gives you context and inspiration for potential product ideas.
absolutely. And she was also very honest about the challenges of AI product management.
Right. It's not all sunshine and roses.
Yeah. She talked about the uncertainty inherent in research outcomes, managing shifting priorities, the difficulty of getting good data, and even the different career progression path in research-focused roles.
It's important to have a realistic understanding of the challenges involved.
Yeah. AI product development often has more ambiguity and longer timelines compared to traditional software projects.
Right.
So managing expectations and being able to adapt to, unexpected outcomes is really key. And then when it comes to actually getting buy-in for AI investments within your company,
Well, that's always a challenge.
she suggested using successful adjacent AI products as examples.
So showing that it's been done before and it can work.
Yeah, and
Oh, that-
proposing small-scale controlled experiments with clear plans for rolling back if things don't work out.
That's a good way to mitigate risk and build confidence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she also emphasized the importance of trust and a company culture that accepts occasional failures,
Right.
because failure is part of the learning process, especially with something as new and complex as AI.
Absolutely.
And then to stay updated on AI, she really underscored the value of academia and research blogs like ArcGIF.
ArcShift?
Yeah.
That's a great resource for finding cutting-edge research.
And she noted that there's this increasing collaboration happening between the research world and the production world.
Right.
And she sees the PM as being that bridge between those two worlds.
Right. Taking those research breakthroughs and finding ways to turn them into real-world products.
And monetize them?
Right. And of course, being mindful of the costs involved, especially with these large language models,
LLMs.
which can be very expensive to run.
Yeah. And then she went on to kind of lay out her 3-week course framework, which covers the AI product development lifecycle, idea creation, how to take AI from research into production, and career pathways.
Sounds pretty comprehensive.
Yeah, and a key part of it is these 9 workshops where the participants actually develop their own AI product from start to finish.
Wow. So they get to actually build something.
Yeah, and she shared a success story of 2 students who teamed up and actually raised funding for their project.
That's amazing. So it's not just theoretical. They're actually applying what they learn and achieving real-world results.
Yeah, and she said the most exciting part of the course is the final presentations when the participants see their creations come to life.
That's got to be incredibly rewarding, both for the students and for her as the instructor.
Yeah, it's where all that theoretical knowledge turns into something tangible.
Right.
And she gave an example of a project that was built in the course.
Oh, what was it?
It was an AI model that could analyze online X-rays and identify potential issues.
Wow, that's impressive.
But she stressed that it was really just a conceptual demonstration. They were using photos and it wasn't intended for actual medical diagnosis.
Right, of course.
But the interesting thing was that the team had no prior coding experience.
Oh, wow. So they were able to build this using no-code tools.
Exactly. And she specifically recommended AutoML by Google Cloud.
AutoML.
Yeah, it's a platform for training custom machine learning models.
ML.
Yeah, with minimal coding.
That's amazing. These no-code platforms are really democratizing AI and allowing a much wider range of people to experiment and build solutions.
Yeah, she gave the example of using it for wind turbine maintenance based on drone images.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
Yeah, and then reflecting on the process of building her own course, she emphasized that she really treated it like a product.
Oh, interesting.
So, forming a hypothesis about the audience understanding their needs, iterating based on feedback, finding the right length, fostering a community, and really engaging personally with the students.
That's a great meta lesson in product management.
Yeah.
Applying those core principles to the creation of a learning experience ensures that it meets the needs of the target audience.
Yeah, and in response to student interest, she actually added a bonus section on how ChatGPT was trained.
Oh, wow. So she's keeping the content up to date and responsive to what the students are interested in.
Yeah. And her advice to listeners was to consider creating their own courses.
That's empowering, sharing your expertise through teaching.
Mm-hmm.
Not only benefits others, but it also deepens your own understanding.
Yeah, and then she did a quick lightning round where she shared some of her, favorite books, podcasts, TV shows.
Oh, fun. Let's hear it.
She recommended Inspired by Marty Kagan, You Look Like a Thing and I Love You by Janelle Shane.
I love that book.
And her own book, Adventures of Women in Tech Workbook.
Oh, cool. I have to check that out.
Her favorite podcast is BOS's podcast.
I haven't heard of that one.
And her favorite recent show is The White Lotus.
I've heard good things.
And then her favorite interview question is, how would you explain a database to a 3-year-old?
Oh, that's a classic.
Yeah.
It really tests your ability to simplify complex concepts.
Yeah, and her favorite AI tools are ChatGPT and Lensa.
Lensa?
Yeah, she specifically mentioned liking the male version and the pet feature.
I've got to try that.
And she encouraged listeners to, connect with her on Instagram, YouTube. Her channel is called Marilee Nika Product Channel, and she has a newsletter.
It's lots of ways to stay in touch and learn more.
Yeah. Okay, so let's shift gears now and talk about Don R.
Okay. The NASA guy.
Yeah, well, he's been at a lot of places, but yeah, NASA too.
That's impressive.
Yeah, and, his opening statement really grabbed my attention.
Oh, what did he say?
He said, AI product management is just like regular product management, but it's also completely different.
Oh, I love that.
I know, right?
It acknowledges the foundational principles of product management. The customer obsession, understanding user problems, advocating for users.
Right.
But it also signals that there are these entirely new dimensions to consider when you're working with AI.
Especially with large language models.
LLMs.
Yeah.
It's a whole new ballgame.
Yeah, and he went on to explain why it's so different, and he really emphasized the non-deterministic nature of LLMs.
Right. So unlike traditional software, where you expect a specific output for a given input,
Yeah.
LLMs can produce different responses even to the same prompt.
Right.
And that introduces a level of uncertainty that requires a completely different approach to, testing iteration measurement.
And this makes it really challenging to do things that traditional PMs rely on,
Like what?
like quantitatively evaluating quality.
Right. How do you measure something that's inherently unpredictable?
Yeah, and monitoring progress and even just defining success.
Right. What does success even look like when you're dealing with this level of uncertainty?
And because of this, Don stressed the need for much more experimentation.
Oh, even more so than in traditional product development.
Yeah, even in areas that seem really straightforward.
Interesting.
He mentioned evaluating 11 different models just for a personal insurance project.
Wow. That's a lot of experimentation.
Yeah, and obviously that translates into longer timelines and needing more resources.
Right. So if you're working with LLMs, you need to factor that in from the start.
Yeah. And he sees a key role of the AI PM as educating their teams and leadership about all of this.
But those differences, yeah.
The non-determinism, the need for experimentation, the longer timelines, the increased resources.
So being that evangelist for AI within the organization.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. He even starts his consulting engagements with a presentation specifically outlining these issues.
That's smart, setting expectations from the beginning.
Yeah, and then he talked about the need for what he called a rock-solid ROI.
Return on investment.
Yeah.
Because these LLM-based solutions can be really expensive to run.
Oh, yeah.
So you need to make sure that the investment is justified.
Yeah, and while it's fine to involve specialists in the ROI analysis, he really cautioned PMs to be directly involved.
So you understand the numbers
Yeah.
and can confidently present the business case.
Yeah, exactly. And then when it came to the level of technical knowledge required for AI PMs, his take was interesting.
What was his perspective?
He said a heavy technical background isn't mandatory,
Okay.
but a comfortable and intuitive understanding of certain core concepts is important.
So not necessarily being able to code, but having that foundational understanding.
Yeah, and he listed out some of those key concepts,
Like
how neural networks learn, which is essentially machine learning,
Right.
why it's often referred to as a black box.
Yes, because it can be difficult to understand exactly why an AI makes a particular decision.
Right, you can't just look at the code and see the logic.
Right, so it's more about evaluating the outcomes and building trust through consistent performance.
Yeah, and then what a transformer is and its breakthrough impact on NLP.
Natural language processing.
Yeah, and the attention mechanism within transformers and why all of this requires significant computational resources.
Right. Transformers are incredibly powerful, but they also require a lot of computing power.
Yeah, and he recommended checking out resources by Jay Alamar.
Oh, yeah, his explanations are really great for building that intuitive understanding.
Yeah, and then he used this thinking fast and slow analogy
Oh, yeah, I love that book.
to describe LLMs as operating at a System 1 level.
So thinking fast, relying on rote knowledge, and quick associations.
Right, but lacking System 2 capabilities.
The slower, more deliberate thinking, critical thinking, planning, self-reflection.
Yeah, and he mentioned that there's research being done into agentic behavior as a potential way to work around some of these limitations.
Right. Trying to give LLM some of those System 2 capabilities.
Yeah, and then looking ahead, he sees AI being integrated into pretty much every product.
So becoming just another tool in the product manager's toolkit.
Yeah, and he's really bullish on conversational AI.
Oh, as like a PM's assistant.
Yeah, or even a colleague.
I like that idea.
Yeah, he shared some anecdotes about brainstorming product specs with Anthropic's Claude.
Claude.
Yeah, and using GPT-4 for learning about the Flask framework and generating tutorial content.
Wow.
And he even said he's looking forward to never having to write a PRD entirely on his own again.
I think a lot of PMs would second that.
Yeah, and he made sure to emphasize just how fast the field is evolving.
It's mind-blowing how quickly things are changing.
I know, it's hard to keep up.
It really requires a commitment to continuous learning.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he offered some advice for aspiring AI PMs, and he focused on 3 key areas.
Okay, I'm listening.
People.
So the importance of working with great people.
Yeah, inspiring colleagues and leaders.
Right, surrounding yourself with the right people.
Impact.
Working on something that matters.
Yeah, making a difference.
Right.
And cool new technology.
So being at the forefront of innovation.
Yeah, and he suggested that, if you can find a role that has at least 2 out of those 3, you're probably in a good spot.
That's a great framework for career satisfaction.
Yeah, and he really encouraged people to create their own opportunities.
Don't wait for someone to hand it to you.
Exactly.
Go out there and make it happen.
And then for those who are, constantly trying to learn new things in tech, he recommended adopting that entrepreneurial mindset.
That makes sense.
And he pointed out that generative AI is still so early.
Right, that's like the Wild West out there.
Which he sees as an advantage.
Right, there's so much opportunity.
Yeah, and he suggested looking for unsolved problems within your company that you could potentially address with generative AI.
Oh, that's smart.
And connecting with senior leadership by offering solutions to their problems.
So making yourself valuable.
Exactly.
And gaining experience in the process.
Yeah, and his mantra is experience starts when you begin.
I love that.
And then he had some specific advice for people who are trying to break into AI PM but don't have, strong AI credentials yet.
Okay, what did he suggest?
Spending a lot of time with existing AI bots.
Like ChatGPT.
Yeah, Claude Gemini really getting to know their capabilities and limitations.
Right, hands-on experience is essential.
And online networking, using LinkedIn.
Building your network.
Yeah, creating an online presence, sharing content, showing that you're engaged in this space.
Right?
And then just persistence and enjoying the learning process.
Right. It's a marathon, not a sprint.
And for those who do have coding skills, he suggested starting to build basic AI applications.
Right. There are tons of resources available online.
Yeah, YouTube tutorials.
Yeah.
And then finally, he talked about stakeholder management,
Oh, that's crucial.
especially working with data scientists and ML engineers.
Machine learning.
Yeah, and he emphasized that those technical teams are motivated by seeing their ideas used productively.
Right. They want to know that their work is making a difference.
Yeah, and by the opportunity to work on interesting and impactful projects.
So it's about finding those win-win scenarios.
Exactly, and he suggested learning enough about their work to propose relevant applications.
Showing that you understand their world.
Yeah, and leveraging internal entrepreneurial initiatives.
Like Google's 20% time,
Yeah,
where employees can work on side projects.
exactly, and then just getting their feedback early and often.
Making them feel like they're part of the process.
Yeah, and he highlighted that a sense of ownership really boosts motivation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
People are more invested when they feel like their ideas are valued.
Okay, so let's move on to Geeky Baller.
Okay, the YouTuber.
Yeah. So he gave his perspective on what an AI product manager actually is.
Right. Was it still a relatively new role?
Yeah, and he defined it as someone who oversees products or features that involve AI or ML.
Machine learning.
Yeah, and that can range from fully AI-powered tools like GitHub Copilot to smaller, more integrated AI features.
Like Gmail Smart Compose.
Yeah, he called it Genie.
Oh, yeah.
And he pointed out that the reason this role is becoming so prevalent is because LLMs are making AI integration much easier.
Right. The barrier to entry is lower now.
Yeah, and he drew a pretty clear distinction between traditional PMs and AI PMs.
Oh, how so?
So traditional PMs, they're focused on strategy, vision, understanding user needs, UX.
User experience.
Yeah.
Right.
But AI PMs need to go deeper into data requirements, model training, model accuracy, dealing with the uncertainty that AI introduces.
The more technical.
Yeah, and he really stressed the need for AI PMs to be comfortable working with data scientists and ML engineers.
And you've got to be able to speak their language.
And he used the example of a customer support chatbot to illustrate this.
Okay. Chatbot.
So traditional PM might focus on the chatbot's interface
Right.
and the basic FAQs that it handles.
Right. The simple stuff.
But an AI PM working on an LLM-based chatbot would need to focus on the model's training to handle more complex queries.
Right. Being able to understand the nuances of human language.
The data collections, the accuracy of that data.
Right. Garbage in, garbage out.
And constantly working with AI researchers to make sure the chatbot's output is actually meeting user needs and improving over time.
So it's a much more dynamic and iterative process.
Yeah, and he really sees it as a more technical role. In terms of the necessary skills, he agreed that, those foundational PM skills are still essential.
Right.
But with AI products, continuous iteration based on data monitoring, model accuracy, data quality, and constantly improving the model based on feedback become even more important.
So it's like PM on steroids.
Yeah, and he really emphasized that data is central to this role.
Right.
You need to understand how to work with data, ensure its quality and accuracy, and understand the principles of model training.
So data fluency is essential.
Yeah, and then he laid out a roadmap for anyone who wants to learn AI and ML.
Okay. A learning path.
Yeah, he recommended starting with Andrew Ng's machine learning course on Coursera.
Oh, that's a classic.
Yeah, and then his deep learning specialization also on Coursera.
Okay.
And then becoming familiar with NLP, natural language processing, and then diving into LLMs and RAG.
RAG, retrieval augmented generation.
Yeah,
That's a mouthful.
it is.
But for those of you listening, the Learner RAG is a way to make language models more accurate and reliable by grounding their responses in external knowledge.
Yeah, and he specifically recommended Andre Karpathy's videos on YouTube for learning about LLMs and RAG.
Oh yeah, his videos are great.
And then for hands-on experience, he suggested building projects like image classifiers, simple chatbots, recommendation systems.
Right, so getting your hands dirty.
Yeah, and then he talked about how to break into AI PM, and he gave advice for people coming from different backgrounds.
Okay, like what?
So for people with a technical background like developers or data scientists, he said, brush up on your AI concepts, make sure you understand the current LLM landscape.
Right, because it's changing so rapidly.
Yeah, but also learn the fundamentals of product management.
Like you need both sides of the coin.
Yeah, and build a strong portfolio with case studies of popular AI tools like ChatGPT and Claude.
Showcasing your understanding.
And personal side projects, ideally something with real users or that generates revenue.
Right, something tangible that you can point to.
Yeah, and then for product managers who are trying to transition into AI PM, He said, identify areas within your current product where AI could enhance the user experience.
So find those opportunities within your existing domain.
Yeah, and start small with a limited data set, build an MVP, and then pitch it to leadership.
Right. Prove the value.
Yeah, and his key takeaway was, even without an AI background, if you're willing to learn the fundamentals and build projects, you can have a career in AI PM.
It's encouraging to hear that you don't need a PhD in machine learning to get started.
Yeah, so the learner, we've really covered a lot of ground today.
A lot of insights.
Yeah, going through the experiences and advice of Merrily Dawn and Geeky Baller.
3 very different perspectives.
Yeah, but it's interesting how much their advice converges on certain key principles. Like
Yeah.
the focus on user needs the importance of understanding data, the need for continuous learning.
Absolutely. Those are the foundations.
And it kind of leads into our final thought for you today.
Okay, what is it?
So as AI becomes more and more integrated into our products, how will our understanding of user need